The fluorescent lights of the departure lounge hummed, casting a sterile glow on the anxious faces around me. I leaned back in the uncomfortable plastic chair, adjusting the brim of my well-worn baseball cap. My clothes were simple: a faded t-shirt, a comfortable hoodie, and a pair of cargo pants. They were practical for a long flight, especially after a whirlwind week of high-stakes negotiations and very little sleep. My small backpack, containing little more than my laptop and a few essentials, rested at my feet. Today was a momentous day. After years of relentless work, setbacks, and unwavering dedication, the acquisition was finally complete. Nexus Airlines, once a struggling regional carrier, was now mine. The final paperwork had been signed just yesterday, a quiet affair, in a downtown New York office far from the public eye. My plan was to fly incognito to the company's main hub in Dallas, observe operations from the ground up, and then make a surprise appearance at the executive meeting scheduled for tomorrow. I wanted to see the true heartbeat of the airline without the usual fanfare and polished presentations. As the boarding call for Flight 734 to Dallas blared through the speakers, I rose, stretching the stiffness from my limbs. The gate area was a chaotic mix of hurried travelers and impatient families. I joined the queue, my mind already buzzing with ideas for restructuring and improving the airline's customer experience. When I finally reached the gate, a stern-faced flight attendant, a woman with a perfectly coiffed bun and an air of detached superiority, scanned my boarding pass. Her eyes, however, seemed to linger on my attire, a slight, almost imperceptible curl of her lip. I dismissed it, attributing it to a long day for her. Stepping onto the aircraft, the familiar smell of airplane disinfectant filled my nostrils. I found my seat, 23A, a window seat in economy class, exactly as I'd booked. My intention was to blend in, to be just another passenger. I tucked my backpack under the seat in front of me and settled in, pulling out a worn paperback. Just as I was getting comfortable, a flight attendant approached my row. It was the same woman from the gate. She stood over me, her arms crossed. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her tone sharp. "Is this your seat?" I looked up, a little surprised. "Yes, it is, 23A. She eyed my casual clothes again, her gaze lingering on my slightly scuffed sneakers. A hint of disdain flickered in her eyes. "Well, you seem to be mistaken. This row is part of our preferred seating for executive club members. I highly doubt you qualify for such an amenity given your, appearance." She gestured subtly at my hoodie, my brow furrowed. "I assure you, I am in my assigned seat. My boarding pass indicates 23A. I pulled out my boarding pass, ready to show her. She scoffed. A short, dismissive sound. "Look, I've been doing this for 20 years. People like you try to sneak into better seats all the time. Just admit you're in the wrong place and move along. We need to get this flight on schedule, and you're holding us up." Her voice, though not loud enough to draw immediate attention from far away, carried an unmistakable condescension, clear for everyone in the nearby rows to hear. The pressure in the cabin began to build, and I could feel the eyes of other passengers turning towards our row, a silent judgment hanging in the air. The flight attendant's words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Other passengers in the vicinity had definitely taken notice. A young couple across the aisle exchanged glances, and an elderly gentleman in the row behind me shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The silence that followed her accusation was thick with unspoken judgment. I felt a prickle of annoyance, followed quickly by a surge of disbelief. To be judged so harshly, so quickly, purely on my attire, was frankly astounding. "Madam," I began, my voice calm despite the rising irritation, "I am not mistaken, and I certainly am not trying to sneak into a better seat. My boarding pass clearly states 23A. I held it up for her to see, my finger pointing to the seat number. She barely glanced at it, her chin tilting upwards. "Anyone can print a fake boarding pass, sir, or perhaps you've been given a courtesy upgrade you don't actually qualify for. Now, I'm going to ask you one last time. Are you going to move to an unassigned seat in the back, or do I need to call the captain?" Her tone was laced with thinly veiled threat, and she folded her arms across her chest, a picture of stern authority. A few more passengers in the surrounding rows now looked openly at the scene, some with curiosity, others with mild discomfort. I noticed another flight attendant, younger, with a nervous expression, approaching slowly, sensing the tension. My mind raced. I could simply show her my true identity, pull out a business card, or even mention the acquisition. But that would defeat the purpose of my incognito travel. I wanted to observe, not to create a spectacle. Yet, to be publicly humiliated and dismissed was intolerable. This wasn't just about my personal comfort. It was about the principle of respect. How many other passengers, I wondered, had she treated this way? "There is no need to call the captain," I said, my voice now firm, betraying none of the frustration simmering beneath the surface. "I am in my assigned seat. If you have any doubt, you are welcome to verify with the gate agent or your manifest." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. "I have no time for such trivialities, sir. We are on a tight schedule. I have a plane to prepare for departure, and frankly, your casual attire suggests you might be more comfortable in an exit row where you can stretch out." The implication was clear. She believed I was a burden, a low-priority passenger. She wasn't just questioning my seat. She was questioning my very right to be there, to occupy a space she deemed too good for someone like me. The younger flight attendant, Emily, finally reached us. "Is everything all right, Sarah?" she asked, her voice tentative. "Everything will be all right, Emily, once this gentleman decides to cooperate," the first attendant, Sarah, replied, not taking her eyes off me. "He seems to be under the impression that this is his seat, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. My boarding pass," I stated again calmly, "shows 23A. Perhaps the issue is with your understanding of the seating chart, not my eligibility. For this seat," Sarah let out a dramatic sigh, rolling her eyes for everyone to see. "Oh, please, let's not be absurd. Do you have any idea how many people travel in outfits like that on our airline, trying to get away with something? Just move. It's truly not worth the fuss." Her words, meant to belittle, only hardened my resolve. This wasn't a fuss. This was about a fundamental lack of respect, a symptom of a larger issue within the airline. I knew at that moment that my unexpected trip was already proving far more insightful than any planned executive briefing could have been. The cabin felt stiflingly silent, all eyes on our exchange. Sarah, the lead flight attendant, had her hands on her hips, a picture of indignant authority. Emily, the junior attendant, looked increasingly uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot. I could feel the tension radiating from them, and from the curious passengers around us. "Madam," I said, my voice low but carrying a distinct edge, "I am telling you for the last time I am in my assigned seat, and I would appreciate it if you stopped making assumptions based on my clothing. It is unprofessional and, frankly, quite insulting." Sarah let out a mirthless chuckle. "Insulting? You're insulting my intelligence by pretending you belong in a preferred seat, looking like you just rolled out of bed. I have a job to do, and that includes maintaining the integrity of our cabin. Now, are you going to move, or will I have to escalate this?" Her hand was already reaching for the cabin interphone, presumably to call the captain. I knew this was the moment. My quiet observation period was clearly over. My initial plan to remain anonymous was no longer feasible. Not if. I wanted to address this blatant display of disrespect and poor customer service. I took a deep breath, letting the anger settle, and replaced it with a calm resolve. "There's no need for that," I said, my voice now carrying a weight that made both flight attendants pause. I reached into my backpack, pulling out my laptop bag. From a hidden pocket inside, I retrieved a small, sleek leather wallet. From it, I slowly extracted a card. It wasn't a credit card, nor a simple business card. It was a corporate ID, a premium access card, embossed with the Nexus Airlines logo, and beneath it, in bold, undeniable print, CEO, Alexander, Alex Thorne. Held it up, not dramatically, but deliberately, allowing them to clearly see the title and my name. Sarah's eyes, which had been narrowed in defiance, widened instantly. The color drained from her face, leaving her ashen. Her perfect bun seemed to sag. She blinked, then looked from the card to my face, then back to the card, a look of utter horror dawning in her eyes. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Emily, standing slightly behind Sarah, also saw the card. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes as wide as saucers. A soft gasp escaped her. The cabin, which had been buzzing with suppressed murmurs, fell into an absolute pin-drop silence. Every single passenger in the vicinity was now staring, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Sarah, who moments before had been so imperious, now looked utterly lost, her bravado completely evaporated. Her arms, which had been crossed in defiance, dropped limply to her sides. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. She stood there, frozen, like a statue carved from ice, her worst nightmare having just materialized in the most unexpected way. The weight of her past actions, her dismissive words, her complete disregard for basic respect, seemed to crash down on her all at once. The silence in the cabin was so profound, you could almost hear the individual clicks of passengers turning heads. Sarah, the flight attendant, remained utterly motionless, her face a ghastly shade of white. Emily, the younger attendant, looked equally stunned, her eyes darting between me and her senior colleague. "Now," I said, my voice calm, but with an underlying steel that commanded attention, "as I was saying, I am in my assigned seat, 23A, and as the owner of this airline, I expect every passenger to be treated with respect, regardless of their attire or perceived status." My gaze held Sarah's. "I'm sure you understand the implications of what I just said." Sarah finally found her voice, though it was little more than a croak. "Mr. Thorne, I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea. It was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake." Her composure had completely crumbled. The perfectly coiffed bun seemed less so, her uniform suddenly appearing disheveled. "A mistake in judgment, certainly," I replied, not letting my gaze waver, "and a reflection of a larger issue that we clearly need to address within Nexus Airlines. Customer service, madam, begins with respect, not with assumptions based on appearances." Emily, clearly emboldened by the turn of events, stepped forward. "Sarah, you really shouldn't have—" she began, but Sarah cut her off with a desperate, frantic glance. "Emily, please," Sarah pleaded, then turned back to me. "Mr. Thorne, I assure you this will never happen again. I will learn from this. Please, sir, I beg your forgiveness." Her voice was trembling. "We will discuss this further, Sarah," I said, my tone firm but not overtly aggressive, "after we land. For now, please prepare the cabin for departure." I put my ID back in my wallet and returned it to my bag. The rest of the flight was a surreal experience. Sarah was virtually invisible, avoiding eye contact with me and moving with a frantic efficiency that bordered on nervous energy. Emily, on the other hand, was incredibly attentive, though still clearly shaken. The other passengers, having witnessed the entire spectacle, offered sympathetic glances and even a few approving nods in my direction. The man sitting beside me, who had silently observed the entire confrontation, leaned over and whispered, "Good for you, sir. She deserved that." Upon landing in Dallas, as passengers began to disembark, I remained seated until the aisle cleared. Sarah approached my row, her face still pale. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice barely audible, Would you like to speak to me in the cabin?" "No, Sarah," I replied, standing up. "I'll be proceeding directly to the executive offices. I expect you to report there by 3 p.m. We will have a very frank discussion about customer service and company values." Her eyes widened in fresh horror, but she simply nodded, defeated. As I walked off the plane, the cool Dallas air was a welcome contrast to the tense cabin. The incident had been deeply uncomfortable, but it had also been incredibly illuminating. It showed me firsthand the disconnect that could exist between corporate values and frontline execution. My unexpected entry into Nexus Airlines, far from being a quiet observation, had become a public demonstration of leadership. The encounter with Sarah was a stark reminder that true authority isn't about the clothes you wear, but the principles you uphold. It solidified my resolve to overhaul the airline's culture, to ensure that every employee understood the importance of treating every single passenger with dignity and respect. The lesson learned that day, both for the flight attendant and for me, was far more profound than any executive briefing could have conveyed. I walked into the terminal, ready to lead. Not just an airline, but a fundamental shift in its approach to service.